Hello, this is J.J. Dewey again. I'm an author, philosopher, and business person. I'm kind of what you would consider an ordinary guy who's decided to step forward and do something that has a strong possibility of changing our country for the better. Now, there's been a lot of people that have wanted to change the country. But the big problem is that almost everybody that does, all they do is just protest what is. They don't come up with a plan. Coming up with a plan is what I consider to be ultimate of importance, because if there's no plan, then there's really no possibility of change. If we just protest, then what we're going to get is somebody else taking over that maybe is just as bad as what we had before. In other words, if we throw the bums out, what can happen is we can wind up with maybe even more bums in the office than we had to begin with. So what often happens in politics is we get rid of one batch of politicians we don't like, and they're replaced with somebody that has with a group that has the same problems, or maybe worse, than we had before. Same thing with the governments. During the Bolshevik Revolution, they thought, man, we're going to overthrow the Tsar and we're going to have a lot better government for the people, by the people, and of the people. And what happened? They had a communist dictatorship that led to Stalin, and they had a much worse government than they had before. And that's because all the people had was a bunch of protesters leading to an overthrow, and the people with the plan were the people that really didn't have a good plan at all. The plan didn't come from the people. So it's important that a plan really comes from the people itself. Now, today I'm going to present a plan, at least the beginning of it here. And the first part of the plan is actually getting some interest. That's why I'm doing this show, is to accumulate a little bit of interest in some of the ideas I present. And then once the ideas begin to get a little bit of a foothold, then we're going to create an organization to implement these ideas. But first of all, we need to get some of these ideas out. Now, the basic concept that I put together, I call molecular politics. Now, you might wonder, why would I call it molecular politics? The reason is that as we go smaller and smaller into the microcosm, into the world of our cells, our molecules, the atomic world, the smaller we get, the more perfect is the organization. For instance, if we go down to a cell, there's an extremely complex organization there that runs almost flawlessly. Matter of fact, if we compare the cell to a planet, the planet itself has the complexity of equivalent to pretty much a cell. That's how complex a cell is. You'd have to look at a whole planet in the macrocosm to come up with a complexity that's just in one cell in your body. The complexity of a cell is so overwhelming that examining just the DNA itself has convinced some scientists that there's a higher intelligence at work up there somewhere. So I call it molecular politics because we, as a human race, are not as perfect as the smaller world. The smaller world, where we get into the atoms, the molecules, the cells, function very seamlessly. And this is what we need to do as human beings. We need to be able to cooperate together and learn to build a better system together, the way that the cells have gathered together and built our bodies, which seem to function much better than the body of humanity as a whole. So the goal is to push the body of humanity toward the harmonious functioning as the little lives that make up our particular bodies themselves. So I call it molecular politics, because that's the goal of the human race, is to learn to live together in peace and to be able to create and build things greater than ourselves that function well and don't have such tremendous conflict that we see about us now. Now, the name of the program is The Majority Speaks. And what we're after here is a more pure form of democracy. And some people say democracy is not constitutional. But the plan I'm going to present is completely constitutional. The Constitution does not have to change at all to be able to bring the majority in so the majority voice can be heard. What we want to do is present a system that represents the people. Right now we have what is called a representative government, but unfortunately we're not being represented. The CBS just released a poll a short time ago that showed that Congress had a 15% approval rating. And that makes George Bush look as popular as Santa Claus, even during his lowest point in his administration. So 15%. The majority of people just are not that happy with Congress. So the present system is just not working the way the founders designed it. The founders put together the best possible system that they could put together at the time, but now with the technology we have, it's possible to put together an even better system that can better represent the majority of the people. And this is what we want to do. If something isn't done, one of two things is going to happen. If we do nothing, the government of this country, and not only this country, but the world, will evolve in the same direction they've been heading the past few decades, which is more and more government control, less and less freedom, more laws, less individual responsibility, more spending. And if all of these things just continue on and on and on, what's going to happen? Sooner or later, we're either going to have a complete collapse, or we may have a collapse and then some type of pure 1984 style government could take over. And this we do not want. But this is where we're headed. What we have to do is look at where we've been going, and then look at where we've been going, and then see where it's leading. And where it's leading is for more and more government. And when we have more and more government and more controls, and it is just increasing, it's never going backwards, then sooner or later we can reach the time where the government has complete control over our lives. So this is one direction. The other direction will be that the squeeze becomes so tight on individual freedom that the individual people, the people themselves, will rise up and say, we've had enough and we want change, and we want our freedoms back the way they were before, or maybe even more than we had before.